What up, Muggles? This is Fyrebyrd, and I'm here with Hermione Secret.
Hi!
And you're listening to the Dusty Cauldron, where we talk about all things Harry Potter and the witchy world at large. Hermione Secret, do you want to talk about your podcast a little bit before we get too far in?
Sure. So, I guess should I let people in on the joke of the Hermione Secret bit? Hermione Secret is the name of the chapter in which time turners are introduced in the series, and that plays along with my podcast pretty well, because my podcast is called The Belated Binge, where I am revisiting Harry Potter chapter or two at a time, which is fairly common. However, I didn't read the series through until I was in my mid-20s for the first time, and now I've read it countless times. I'm doing it again, and I'm having a blast picking it apart for the podcast, going super deep dive into what I'm calling some of the most important questions plaguing the fandom, like what did Dumbledore know and when? Why does Harry only know how to do 2 spells by the end of this series? And are there any competent adult wizards in this series whatsoever?
There might not be.
I think you're right. I haven't found one yet, and we are into, you were just my guest at the time of recording this for Chapter 15 of Chamber of Secrets. So we're almost 2 books in, and I have yet to spot one.
Well, Hermione Secret is going to join us today for one of our headcanon episodes. And the fan theory, sort of fan fiction-y vibe that we are going to dig into today is what might be different in the series if Lily had forgiven Snape after the scene during their owl year where he calls her the M word. So, as the guest, I thought I might give you the first point in what you think might change based on that.
So, this is a struggle for me, because I don't know necessarily that much would change if I really am honest about it, because it would have just ended up being the same outcome. Their friendship may have possibly lasted another 5 minutes till the next thing, but his path was, he was going to be a Death Eater and she was going to fight Death Eaters. So eventually, probably not much has changed if we just say if she forgave him for that one moment. Now, if we go as far as to say that Snape truly felt whether you want to call it love, which I would argue it was not, but if Snape truly valued Lily in his life enough to actually change his decisions of the path that he's going to go down, then we've got a kind of an interesting trip and journey that we can go down with that one, because it doesn't just end up in the same inevitable place, forgiveness after mudblood or not. You know what I mean?
I can definitely appreciate where you're coming from. I thought about, particularly in this, what sort of paths are they going down? What might change? And while I think it's unlikely that they're going to become super close again like they were in their early childhood, I think that their friendship may have been able to be salvageable if he seemed truly repentant when he approached her for the apology. And I think that you could argue, based on what we see in the memories, that at least in that moment he felt truly repentant, though I am not holding anything against Lily for not wanting to forgive him for it, just to be clear there. But I think if their friendship had been salvageable, it may then, though unlikely, have been able to have prevented him from joining the Death Eaters. If I try to follow that train of thought, I think that would make him more likely to become a spy earlier, if his joining, even if it is to become a spy, isn't the last straw and she's I'm done with you.
See, that's interesting. I think you and I actually just I think we just interpret that memory differently in why, like, what it was that drove Lily away from him. I don't interpret that memory as really having much to do with the slur that he called her, because she uses it in the memory. She's like, she basically says, I don't care about, mudblood, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's what all of your friends call me. That's what you call everybody else that's like me. Like, it's not the word. It's the, and she had other issues with it throughout the memories of, it's the people that he chose to hang around with. It's the choices that he was making. And she's like, you can't even deny it. You can't wait to get out of here and go join the Death Eaters. And I think that was always her problem. That was the point where she was like, this is why we can't be friends. Like, this is why we can't continue to pretend like we are friends, because this is where you're going, and this is you have chosen this, and you're not even trying to tell me that you're not, and I'm going to fight against that. So let's just call it a day here, bud. And so I don't necessarily, like, forgiveness or not for the word and for that incident, I don't think she was ever going to forgive him joining the Death Eaters. So for me, it's very much, for me, it comes back to Snape would actually have to value her in a way to change the choices that he was making and the people he was going to be around with, and ultimately the side he was going to choose. And that's where where you were going with it, with, like, becoming a spy earlier. I don't know that he could have in this scenario, because I think the reason that he's able to become a spy for Dumbledore is that he was already indoctrinated. He was a Death Eater. He was marked. He was participating. He had been since he was a teenager in this circle, and he was trusted in that way. So he was in it. You know what I mean? He didn't go undercover to gain their trust. He already had it. And Dumbledore was just able to use that because of what happened with the prophecy, and basically leveraging it against Snape, even though, let's be honest, Dumbledore was hiding the Potters and the Longbottoms already, so Snape didn't actually have to go undercover. He was still going to get the thing that he came to Dumbledore to ask for. But we're not talking about Dumbledore in this. We're talking about Snape.
Yeah. So I agree with some of your points and not with others. So I agree that the issue is much larger than what he said in the fight. For the what if of it all, I would ask you to suspend some disbelief. For, like, we are assuming in the base question that the forgiveness does happen. And so then I would be perfectly happy to expand that to say she's not just forgiving him for what he said, but what his actions are, with the caveat that his actions must be changing in order for her to actually give the forgiveness. So it changes our what if framework a little bit. I disagree that he couldn't start out with the intent to spy, though, because he has already been winning all of that trust with how he has behaved for the last, at this point, 5 years with the students. I think he could continue to behave in that way, but have different motivations. So I think he would still be able to reasonably start out always being a spy, if he had ever had the inclination to do so, which in canon he does not.
Yeah, and I guess I wonder how that would have been birthed. Like, who would have initiated that?
Him being a spy?
Yeah.
I think that it would come from him based on conversation with Lily, essentially to prove that he isn't what he was before. Like, he's showing, like, yes, I'm saying I'm going to join, but here's how I'm intending to, like, try to funnel information to you. Like, I think it would be his, because let's be real, his feelings with Lily are not love, they're obsession. And so his new obsession would be, how can I take advantage of something I have at my disposal to make Lily see value in me?
I like this. The thing that I'm struggling with a little bit with the idea of him starting out then, because we have to remember, what was it? Was it 6th year that this went down? 5th year for them? I can't remember which one it was.
It's like after the Owls.
They're 15. Yeah, they're 15 years old. So they're neither one of them are one or the other yet. They know which side that they resonate with. They know which side that they intend to be on when they quote unquote come of age. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, and I wouldn't imagine this being the case, but like, unless Dumbledore is holding like his version of the Slug Club, but it's for like little budding Order of the Phoenix membership, almost like a mini Dumbledore's army of their day, like, they're not actually affiliated in that way. So I guess here's what I'm struggling with is Snape could have this intention at 15. He could be like, oh, I'm going to be this, like, super spy. But, like, more than just he and Lily are going to have to know that for him to not get dead. By the other side, like, by the good side. You know what I mean? And, like, so how do they get that word up the chain so that, like, because ultimately Dumbledore is going to have to know that that's in play in order to make sure that the people that he's, you know, all of his chess pieces aren't, like, taking out the one that they don't know is a spy on the other side. You know what I mean? Like, later, when Snape is a spy, the Order is fully aware. Hell, the Wizarding world is fully aware that he's supposedly in that. Remember the scene in Goblet? It's the memory scene of Dumbledore's of the trial of Karkaroff, and Karkaroff names Snape, and Dumbledore stands up and he's like, no, Snape he was a Death Eater, he's changed allegiances and turned spy for us in a courtroom full of people, so it's not like it's a big ass secret.
Mm-hmm.
So like that, I always kind of imagined, like, the reason that Snape isn't targeted, I guess, by the Order is, like, they know that he's on their side somehow, you know? And he's coming back to Grimmauld Place and he's giving his reports on what's going on in Death Eater camp and whatnot. So, like, how does that piece get into play if he's starting that early?
So I don't think it would be as visible as it is in the later books, because I would argue that his role as a spy was probably not well known to the majority of the Order until the conclusion of the war, because otherwise it would just increase the likelihood of the dark people finding out that he's in fact spying. And so for an outward perspective, for the Death Eaters he's working with, though there could be some that get suspicious, and for the majority of the people in the Order, it would be assumed that he had just joined the Death Eaters, that he had done what everyone expected him to do, and it was evil.
I don't hate it. I like how we're getting a different motivation to ultimately the same end. We're really just getting a jump start on his role later on, and he doesn't have to, you know, give up his quote unquote love to death in order to be motivated to do it.
Yeah. And like, I think for a lot of things, it doesn't change how things play out in, like, the First War. Like, I think you probably still see him at battles with Death Eaters because he has to maintain a cover, and you probably still see him do bad things. You just are more likely to see key things that they didn't know the first time around being known by the Order. And one of those things that I think is a possibility, if this played out this way, is we may actually find out that Wormtail's a spy, because there is the chance that Snape runs into him in a circumstance when he shouldn't have been able to, unless Wormtail was on the wrong side.
Yeah, I like that. I do like that. the other thing that was just going through my head, and it's fleeting as we speak, is what if it didn't also save Lily and James?
Oh, yeah, like it still fails. Yeah.
Right, because, like, the idea behind, okay, well, because ultimately, Snape's the one that marked them for death. Mm-hmm. He's the one that overheard Trelawney, the first half of Trelawney's prophecy. He's the one that ran and took that information straight to Voldemort, and then freaked out when Voldemort was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's this boy, I'm gonna kill that boy, and, you know, presumably the parents, and then he goes, oh, no, don't kill Lily. Mm-hmm. Kill James and the baby. I don't give a shit, but don't kill Lily. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't ask. Can I curse on this podcast?
Yeah, we always put a not safe for work tag so people know.
But yeah, but what I think is interesting is let's just, because there's another path to this that I actually took this that I want to get your thoughts on too. That's completely different to this, but I kind of like the idea of what if is as part of his double agentness, as part of his spyness, he still takes a bit of that prophecy back.
And it's interesting.
It's like under the assumption that the Fidelius charms are solid.
So then he would have to not know that Wormtail is a spy. But he could, even, like, say we want to have that plot point happen, that could still happen after it's too late. He's already given the information to Voldemort.
Yeah, he's already done it, and then, like, afterwards he, like, walks out of the room, or, like, the next time he walks into a Death Eater thing, he sees Peter Pettigrew sitting there, and he's like, what the is going on? And, like, he can't do anything about it. It's already, like, happened. He's already given up the location.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. And, like, would make the death so much more gut-wrenching. Like, it's already so bad. I know. But that would... I would be like, how does Snape not end up offing himself, honestly? Because he basically just killed Lily himself.
Well, I mean, he does in the main series.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest. And that's why he's supposedly so remorseful and so, like, miserable the rest of his life, is because he did. He was the one that was like, here's the magic bullet. I'm going to point it right at her head.
Yeah, I would argue in the canon that he genuinely doesn't put together 2 and 2 of who he's putting on the chopping block before he tells. I think he just doesn't care who he puts on the chopping block. He just wants to serve his master.
For sure.
So this one is a little darker because it's like, by having the foreknowledge of, like, okay, these people are going to go under Fidelius' charm to protect them. He knows who the likely targets are.
Pregnant.
Yeah, he knows. So it's like, it's worse.
It is worse.
It's interesting. If we don't take that particular approach, I do think it actually increases the odds of Neville being the chosen one, because if he's sort of interacting with these people, he's more privy to what's going on in their lives. He's gonna know who the potential targets are, and he's gonna work to protect her. It could either mean that he pushes it more and makes it sound like it should be the Longbottoms, hopefully on faith that they're going to be protected, but who knows, because he does have the obsession with Lily that might blind him from making good choices. Or alternatively, could lead to him being like, oh, I'm not going to share what I've heard because otherwise it's going to put someone that I think I love at risk.
And that ties into a little bit of the kind of the alternate reality that I was thinking through prepping for this podcast too. That idea of whether would it still be Harry that would be the quote unquote chosen one, or would it indeed, end up being Neville if Snape and Lily were actually friends?
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I like the thought exercise.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I want to circle back to something that you'd said earlier because I got thinking about it. Like, we see in the later, like the second war, that it's not all that uncommon to involve children. But that actually wasn't very common in the first one. So you were very, like, correct in what you're saying. It was like, none of them have actually pledged allegiance anywhere. The one instance we have of maybe not being of age is Regulus Black. I think he joined the Death Eaters while he was still in Hogwarts and then died shortly after graduation because of the whole Horcrux situation. But we didn't have any of the Order members joining before graduation. So there's like an imbalance of when someone might become like officially aligned, which is interesting.
Well, yeah, and
go ahead.
We also don't know if Regulus got marked in school, or if that didn't actually happen until graduation. Like, he could have just been. I would use the term that is popular in like a motorcycle club type of terminology as like a hang around is what they call it. Like, when just somebody that hangs around with the club, but they're not part of it, and then they later can go through the steps to become part of it. Like, that's kind of what I think of with these, like, with the Snapes at 15, with the Reguluses during Hogwarts, with the that's what makes Draco's situation so I think unusual and surprising, that he actually does have a dark mark at that point, because you don't expect him to, or at least like the wizarding world wouldn't expect a 16-year-old to be a full-on Death Eater yet, but like totally could be in the circle and like hanging around with Death Eaters and on the way there, but like becomes an adult, because like there has to be something to the fact that like these kids have a trace on them until they're adults. So like, how much can you really use a little Death Eater 15-year-old? You kind of need the trace to break, I imagine, before you can like you would think, a dark mark on their arm. You know what I mean?
I think you could get away with putting a mark on their arm. You would struggle to get away with like them going out on raids.
Yeah.
I sort of felt that it was implied that he must have joined while he was a student, because he's attempting to leave in 1979. And so like, I would think you'd have to be there long enough to know that you should leave, because the beginning would be all about like wooing you. And so I was trying to real quickly while you were talking, try to figure out when it was that Sirius Black left home, because he refused to join. Because then I assumed that Regulus joined in his place, but I can't find the. I
always thought of it as like. Yeah, I always thought of it as like Regulus was in Slytherin House. A lot of the Death Eaters were also in Slytherin House. Not all Death Eaters are in Slytherin. Not all Slytherins are Death Eaters. We can go ahead and get that stamped. But we know that there's a pipeline, to say the least, in that house. And that's where I think, and the parents are not Death Eaters, but they are very pure blood loyalists and stuff like that. So like, I think the way that I at least interpreted Regulus's character is like, when they go into his bedroom in Grimmauld Place, like it looks like a shrine to Voldemort. Like, he was a fanboy in school, and so immediately upon graduation, he would have been like in. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like you're in school, you're hanging around you're hanging around the group, but you're not in it yet, and then you become an adult, and he's like, I can't wait to be a part of this. And as soon as he is, he starts to like figure out, oh, this is no joke, and like, oh, this is not what I should be doing here, and like he figures out the Horcrux thing, which does imply that he's a very intelligent human being. At a very young age, but I guess I always imagined that was Regulus's path, and the reason that Sirius left wasn't because he wasn't going to join the Death Eaters. It was because he hated the pure blood like mania that was in his house.
I think like you make valid points, and I think there's enough gray area in the Marauder era stuff that
So much.
I can't refute either point, honestly. So, we know that he tried to leave in 79, which would have made him 18. So he could have very plausibly not joined until he was 17 and had graduated.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter, honestly. Like, if Regulus was in at 16, it feels very much like that would be highly unusual. But I do secretly like the idea on the other side of Dumbledore having his version of Dumbledore's army at the school. And they're just like the little Order of the Phoenix recruits. And it's our Marauders, it's Lily, it's, all of that happening, and they're doing little defense trainings and stuff. And I love the idea of that taking place at Hogwarts.
I could definitely see it. And even if they weren't like outright having like special defense club meetings, like I think they were certainly being groomed to become Order members upon graduation.
Right. And I'm sure that it wasn't like where I feel like what makes the Draco thing so insidious, and the fact that he gets indoctrinated literally at like 16, is like he was forced in. Like, we're going to kill your family if you do not do this thing. And while he was still in the mindset of being like proud to be a part and wanting to be a part, we don't get a lot of on paper in the text, a lot of like the forcing of people to join things, or like the going in and like I can't think of the word that I'm fumbling over and struggling with, but essentially, for instance, like on the Order of the Phoenix side, we don't get a lot of indication that Dumbledore was like going through the school and like recruiting, being like, oh, you would make a good Order of the Phoenix member. I'm going to groom you and like put you into this thing. But like more observing, oh, these are the students who are outwardly standing up against the ideas of Voldemort and standing up against the budding Death Eaters, and like they have a clear rivalry, and those are the ones that I should have contact with upon becoming adults or whatever. Is kind of, and it kind of seems the same way because Voldemort never actually got a teaching job to come in and teach Defense Against the Dark Arts and recruit directly out of Hogwarts. It also feels on that side where it's like you kind of have to show, you gotta kind of show your colors a little bit if you're not a child of an already Death Eater or whatever. So I think that there's an element of choice, and that's ultimately what this series is supposed to be about, right? Is the element of choice in all of these characters and choosing which side they want to be a part of. And then that's when they get like, okay, here's your dark mark, or like, okay, here's what it means to be in the Order. It's, blind faith in Dumbledore kind of stuff.
I agree with like the general premise about choice and all that. I don't know if I'm actually fully on board of that he wasn't doing anything to sway things a certain way, because he has been throughout the entire series the collector of broken toys. And he's already like...
It's a good way to put it.
It's a given that Remus will join, because Remus doesn't have his life without Dumbledore giving it to him. He's indebted him, even though he's not done it in an insidious way, or at least that appears outwardly to be insidious. I would argue that there's still some grody motivations there. And he does give things to people that he is trying to lead a certain way. Because I would argue with the behavior that you've seen from James Potter throughout the entire series, the idea that that's the person that was chosen to be the head boy is flabbergasting. But if you are trying to sway someone's opinion, that would certainly catch their attention, even though they've been a bully for 6 years and absolutely should not be given an ounce of power.
I also think that that's an absolute plot hole.
Yeah.
James Potter was not head boy at Hogwarts.
He shouldn't have been, but he was.
Well, I know that it's said early in the series that he was, and it's by Hagrid, right? Head boy and girl in their day at Hogwarts, but it's bullshit. He wasn't, because he wasn't a prefect. Which is how Harry got comforted in not being chosen to be prefect himself, was because his dad wasn't a prefect. Remus was. Because supposedly Remus was going to be able to, keep an eye on Sirius and James. You
Yes.
can't be head boy without being a prefect.
Says who? Where in canon do you have proof that someone can't be made head boy that wasn't a prefect? Because you have a canon example of someone who was not a prefect being made head boy.
Okay, I mean, I guess it's not completely impossible. I thought it was. I don't have book and chapter that says that it is. I thought that head boy and girl were chosen from the lot of prefects, from the 2 years before or whatever. But no, you're right. It is possible that you don't have to be a prefect to be head boy. I always thought of that actually as a author hadn't come up with that in the first book when talking up Harry's parents, that Harry's dad was actually kind of a bully for a period of time in his school age and wouldn't actually be head boy.
Certainly.
Wouldn't actually be you know what I mean? I always thought of that as oops, probably shouldn't have wrote that in chapter 5 of this series because we haven't fleshed out who James Potter actually is.
Yeah, no.
But you're right, it's possible.
Yeah, no.
It's not impossible.
With logic, if we try to look at this logically, where you're approaching it, absolutely 100% correct. But if we take at face value what is represented in canon, whether or not the writer who shall not be named did it on purpose or made a mistake, it does point to that it can happen. But then it underlines the point I'm making of it was done with a purpose, right? Because logically, you should have to be a prefect to become head boy. So why would you give head boy to someone who's never been prefect unless you had some other motivation for doing it?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, and here's one thing that I do want to try to stand up for the James Potter character a little bit in this moment, simply on this. The only bit about James Potter we truly get is Snape's view, who absolutely hated him. And one instance in which he bullied Snape. Now, he did bully Snape. That doesn't make him a good guy. But we also get a lot of, there's a lot of missed time between the 15-year-old who bullied Snape in that one memory and the 17-year-old who became head boy, the person who Lily couldn't stand at 15, but fell in love with and married and had Harry by 21. In all accounts of the people around him that aren't named Snape say he had a problem with Snape because Snape was addicted to the dark arts as a kid, and James hated the dark arts, and they immediately got off to a horrible start with each other, versus how James actually treated the rest of the population of Hogwarts or any other characters in this series, because we get so little about that character. And so we don't know outside of how he treated Snape as an individual if there was any merit to him possibly becoming head boy with or without being prefect. That is my 2 minutes on the fandom likes to take James Potter and just make him into a total bully, horrible human being, and a almost stalker of Lily, and just forcing her into going out with him, or something bad is going to that kind of angle is a lot of what I see in stuff that gets posted and shared or whatever within the fandom. And I'm we don't kind of know enough about this dude to go all the way there. What we do know is that he hated Snape and Snape hated him, and the two took every opportunity to curse each other both ways the whole time that they were at school.
I think that's an interesting take on James. And I'll start with the preface of I actually don't hate James as a character. But I think that you're missing some of the plot points that we get that I believe Remus shares with Harry when he's sharing about Lily. And that Lily would be frustrated with James. And I believe the line that she has is because he will hex people just for fun. He's definitely gotten detention before for doing like a swelling charm on a student's head. And I'm blanking on the student's head, but I know that it wasn't Snape. It was someone else. And then he gets described, like with some different like misdeeds that he had throughout the series. That said, we still have the gap of time between 15 and 17 where he has an opportunity to grow up. So I'm not actually trying to refute your point. I'm just saying that he bullied people other than Snape.
Oh, for sure. I was specifically talking about the time that passes between James Potter is an arrogant toe rag and James' father is the father of my child.
Yeah, valid.
like that period of time and what could have, like, the point where he grows up, like everyone on the page not named Snape says that he did, and turned out to be a stand-up guy in whatever facet of the word. We just don't know enough. And I get a little bit, like, not defensive of him, but I just read some of the stuff that gets, like, put out there in these, like, little excerpts or whatever in social media, and I'm like, man, people really like to make this dude out to be a really, really shitty guy.
Yeah, I think that in the book, he gets a little bit of the halo effect that may or may not be deserved. But outside of the book, he definitely gets like the devil horn effect, which is not deserved. Like, was he a bully?
The truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Was he evil? Yeah. No.
Let's... And I don't think he, like... and I don't think he, like, just completely pestered Lily until she finally gave in, like, what would be considered now in 2022, like, very, very inappropriate conduct.
Yeah, there'd be some consent issues there. I wouldn't say that James went to that level.
No. But it does actually, like, lead, if we have time, it does lead interestingly into the Snape path that I was going in my head before we prepped, like, when we were prepping for this.
I'm interested.
So, if Snape valued Lily in the way that he would need to for them to remain friends and to remain close, right? At some point in time, Lily's still going to have that moment with James. Like, I don't think that part changes because I think James does. But I think that they find a way for Snape to coexist within that group if it is important to Lily for them to do so upon maturation. And so this made me wonder, because also the problem that James, like I said, the biggest problem that James had with Snape was the dark arts and the Death Eater stuff. Like, they were on opposite sides. If Snape and Lily are truly friends and Snape chooses not to become a Death Eater, and in this case not to be a spy in the Death Eaters, and actually, like, makes that choice, then they have a lot less to butt heads over to begin with. And I think they could possibly, in that alternate universe, become cordial enough for Lily's sake. And it made me wonder, is it possible that after several years of this, like, cordialness, and him being not a member of the group, but a guy that's around the group, could Snape have actually taken Peter's place?
That's
Is
really
it possible that at the moment that Sirius decides that everyone is going to know that he is the secret keeper, the ultimate curveball isn't to go make it Peter, but to actually make it Severus freaking Snape?
That's a really fascinating idea that I had not considered. That means that Lily and James live if they do that. Because he's far too obsessed with Lily to give over the information.
Right. And I think that's like, would he have died with it and they actually live? Is it possible that Snape has enough in him to, like, is that bond going to be strong enough that, let's say, they've become cordial enough, right? Like, to not kill each other. But let's say that he and James have a row, which I'm guessing in this alternate universe happens a lot. They just don't, like, hex each other and curse each other about it. They just yell at each other, and then they are told to go cool off. One of them leaves, and then a few days later comes back, and it's, head nods, because that's what guys do, apparently, when we're about to fight each other, and then we see each other a couple days later. Would something like that be enough for him to, like, flip it?
I don't think so.
If he was targeted, would he actually, like, hold it?
I think he'd run before he would give it, because for him, he could hate James every day, and the problem wouldn't be that does the information give up James. It would be that the information also gives up Lily. What's interesting, though, is, like, let's replace Sirius with Snape. So, same personality, but now Sirius is the one that, like, is on the outs, and he's somehow involved with Death Eaters. I believe if he got annoyed enough with one person, would give over information because he wouldn't realize the implications. And I underline that with his choice to nearly turn Remus into a murderer just because he wanted to make Snape suffer. But I actually don't see that same sort of short-sighted motivation in Snape. He's too calculated in the decisions that he makes. Even though they're stupid.
So I guess in this scenario, you're saying if Sirius had actually been the secret keeper, you think that he could have possibly just, like, gotten pissed and blown that up?
Oh, no. No, I'm saying, like, let's go back to the very beginning of the series and we swap roles. And Sirius is not the one who leaves his family. No, in the world where Sirius is who he is, he doesn't make that decision. I'm saying, like, he would have to be a different character. But if he was put in charge of it and he didn't like James, then I think he's at risk of letting it go in a moment, like, just a fit of anger, and then later being devastated by what he's caused, but just not thinking forward enough to what that choice would mean, because he makes much more emotional decisions.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. It's interesting, but this is why I said it you bringing up would Neville end up being the choice. I think in both of these alternate realities, this is Neville Longbottom and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah. Well, then there's the other thing. Like, so let's sort of veer off to the idea that he has joined before he hears the prophecy, and he's unwilling to put Lily at risk, so he chooses not to share the prophecy, which inadvertently also shields Neville. So now we have a world in which there is no chosen one, because the prophecy being made doesn't make the chosen one real. Someone has to believe that the prophecy is true. So, I mean, I guess you could argue that Dumbledore would try to make the prophecy true, but let's discard that for a moment and say that the only person that was going to make the prophecy real was Voldemort, because he truly believed that he needed to defeat this other person. Well, now he doesn't know that there's this other specific person that he needs to defeat. So we don't have a chosen one that's going to rise up with a power he knows not to stop him. So does that actually prolong the war? Because now we don't have any sort of trigger to lead us in the knowledge of Horcruxes. So we don't know, on the light side, that he's immortal at this point. So how do they stop him?
I hate to do this, because I am what the fan would consider a Dumbledore apologist. And it's not because I do actually apologize for everything that Dumbledore does, but I find him the most fascinating character in the series to dissect and talk through, and I do believe that his intentions were always righteous, I guess you could say. Like, he was always doing it for that wonderful quote, the greater good. But all of the decisions were not kind ones. You know, like, and so I think in that scenario, I think what you're talking about, I think Dumbledore plans how to activate the prophecy. Because there's two schools of thought. One, yes, the war could be basically prolonged inevitably until, I don't know, Dumbledore and Voldemort actually face each other. Dumbledore gets the best of him, but he's not actually dead. You know, like, maybe that's how we get to the, you know, quote unquote fall. I don't know. But I think Dumbledore would see the prophecy as, oh, this is Tom's weakness, because this is going to be Tom basically handing over the power to defeat him. And we need that.
Yeah.
So I need to manipulate the chessboard to make sure that Tom hands over the power to defeat him so that we can actually defeat him. But I think it would be a very calculated way of going about it, because let's be honest, like, Dumbledore was trying to protect the child from being murdered.
Only when it was an infant.
The child. Right. So it's kind of like, does he sit on the prophecy and monitor the two potential children as they grow up? See which one could be most likely to succeed in the endeavor, and then somehow stage a way for Voldemort to get word that there's a prophecy, or pieces of a prophecy, or something, you know what I mean? Like, get that rumor out there, maybe through his little Snape spy from 15. However he would do, like, is that how we would get there? Because that's how, yeah, that's the only way that Voldemort can truly be taken down, unless through those years of war, Dumbledore's able to piece together Horcruxes with other information.
Well, so we know he's already made several Horcruxes before Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Everything except for Harry and Nagini is already made.
Yeah.
So he would continue, because he wanted the 7 split. So he needed...
Well, there's one more, right?
Yeah.
That's where he was, and Dumbledore theorized that he was saving that for Harry.
Yeah.
Like, for Harry's death.
But he wouldn't have... So in this world, he doesn't save it for Harry, right? So he just has to find one more to get to what he considers to be the perfect number. Which
Right,
fascinating that it's not
he
9
had one
instead
left.
of 7. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But... So he can continue on that path without ever knowing anything about the prophecy. I think it's interesting. Mm-hmm. And once this episode is released, which will be at the 1st of December, I want to hear what you think after you listen to what you said about Dumbledore. If you still think that you are a defender of Dumbledore. Because everything that you said was things I was going to use for why he would manipulate this situation because he's a bad guy. but you said it in a different tone. It was really interesting. But I don't know. I want to hear from you after you hear it back. But I think that there is the possibility that maybe he waits and he watches, right? And maybe from some sort of battle, we do have where Voldemort's dead, but he's not dead, and we're able to start putting pieces together and figure out the Horcrux thing. And so then maybe it doesn't lead to a world where the dark wins because the Horcruxes haven't been figured out. I do think there is one potential for figuring out the Horcruxes pretty early that I think is only a potential if Lily and James don't die. Because then Sirius has more bandwidth because he's not going through this devastation and going to prison and all of that, to wonder where his brother went. And if we really start to dig into where is Regulus, maybe we find out the story about the locket sooner. And I do believe Dumbledore is smart enough to put 2 and 2 together and say, that's a Horcrux.
Yeah. I think you're totally right. And I think we also have another path to it. That could be a reaffirming or at least a part of that plot as it's unwinding, and it's Lily's relationship with Slughorn.
Oh yeah, maybe that's how they get. If
she's alive, like it doesn't take Harry, giving Slughorn a shit ton of alcohol, and a story about his parents and his mom, who Slughorn likes so much. Lily could go to him directly.
Yeah, and we'll probably get it a lot sooner.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a question that I think you will hate.
Good.
But so let's say Snape is a part of her life moving forward. Like, they've made up, they've decided, they're friends. And maybe James doesn't stop being antagonistic. Maybe he just hates Snape that much. He can't stop with the bullying. What do we think happens if Lily and James don't get together because this is that much of a problem?
Then Harry has a different name.
And potentially a different father. And I'm not arguing that it would be Snape. That's not the argument I'm making.
It definitely would not be
Snape.
Snape.
But, what happens if she doesn't get with James? Does that make her more vulnerable? Like, are we more likely to lose Lily because she doesn't have some of the protections that would come with marrying a pureblood when she's a Muggleborn?
Either that or she becomes kind of the de facto Hermione of that era.
Potentially, yeah.
Because we're led to believe that she's quite gifted, particularly with potions, but that she was no slouch with a wand. Mm-hmm. And, she kind of, maybe instead of whatever energy she pours into the relationship with James, she pours into, I'm a Muggleborn and these people want me dead. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen.
Totally fair. Do you think she is more or less safe if she's not with James?
I think she's less safe. I don't think she's less competent or capable, but I think she's less safe. I think that one, like you said, being a Muggle, and I guess we're assuming here that, like, it's a one true love thing and there's no other dude that she could have possibly gotten with because, in this series you either marry your high school sweetheart or you're destined to die alone.
Yeah.
From all accounts, Lily was a catch. I'm sure that she would have had plenty of options not named James Potter, but let's pretend that she doesn't like any of them. I think that James being pureblood and being in a well-connected, wealthy family would have provided a added layer of security for her as a Muggle-born in that time. Some at least access to resources that would have been, helpful, rather than trying to fend for herself in this world without any of that. Because, Harry ends up with whole just slew of cash, and it's not coming from the Evans side of the family. So I imagine that did afford them during the war some resources that were helpful for them while they were alive that she wouldn't have had access to.
Definitely. I think in some ways it also might be that she ended up safer not with him, but I think that plays out with until the war ends, like at a certain point she's actually not highly involved in the wizarding world. I think she would still be a defender, and she would be more of like I'm brewing potions to heal the people that are out on the front lines, and I can give as good as I get if I get caught in a fight, but I'm trying to stay more on the sideline and keep my muggle family safe and things like that. I think that there is a showboatiness that comes with James that would have drug her a little further into the fray that I think she would have necessarily been comfortable with.
That's highly possible. Again, we're also, like, this is an assumption of, like, obviously she's safer if she's not with James because James does not impregnate her with a chosen one baby that Voldemort's going to come try to murder.
That too. She's no longer eligible for the prophecy.
Right. Like, we are going, with that assumption. But, yeah, I can definitely see her in a role like what you're saying. I think that either way, she's not hiding, and she's in this on the side of the Order, with or without James, because of the interaction that we get with Severus, and why she couldn't forgive him. Not, again, I argue, not for calling her a mudblood like he did, but for the fact that he wants to be a Death Eater. And she is not going to, like, she's not going on any trajectory that is not fighting against Death Eaters in some way.
Definitely. And I would argue, if she ended up in, like, a healing role, that considering who the majority of Order members are is one of the most important roles. Because not to throw any shade at Gryffindor, but sometimes they make brave but not intelligent decisions. And they need someone to put the pieces back together when there are implications for those decisions.
Well, yeah, and I mean, something as simple as brewing a wolfsbane potion would have gone a long way for the group that they had. And it's highly possible that she was.
Yeah, I think even in this scenario where everything plays out as canon, she probably did a lot of brewing because she's very talented as a potions mistress. I think it's interesting to think about the what ifs. I think, though, if we take all of the canon things as they are, she was not going to forgive him. So that, like, this is an episode of just like what could happen if one thing was changed, but with what we have in canon, this never would have happened.
Right, and he never cared about her enough to change himself.
No, because he doesn't even understand that it's not care that he has. It's obsession.
Yeah, so it's on either side. She was never going to forgive him, and he was never going to do the things that would actually be necessary for her to.
Yeah. I think we agree on that. Okay, well, we've kind of dug into what we think would happen if this one little piece was changed. But now I'd love to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about your podcast and like where we can find you on episodes and on socials.
Yeah, sure. So Belated Binge is available across like all the podcast platforms. It's also available on the website, belatedbinge.com. I have a cool leave a voicemail feature. If you want to yell at me for anything that I said here, or you go listen to my podcast and want to yell at me for any of those opinions, or want to agree with me or answer any of the questions that I pose, that is a really cool feature that I would love to use more often than I get to, with people leaving a voicemail there. So that's pretty cool. I'm also on all of the main socials, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I do post on YouTube as well with the episodes and that get posted there, and shorts too. And all of those things are at Belated Binge or / Belated Binge or / at Belated Binge. Whatever they use, they're Belated Binge on all of them.
Perfect. I highly recommend checking him out. I've listened to quite a few of his episodes, and he has some great points. And he has really interesting guests on.
Like one Fyrebyrd.
I enjoyed that episode. I really liked listening to one of the recent episodes with, it's the podcast that recently changed their name. I think now it's For Fox's
For Fox's Sakes.
Yeah. That was a great episode. So I really honestly wasn't trying to plug myself as a good guest. I like some of the other guests that you've had on, but I had a blast on there.
And the one thing that I do, speaking of the website, belatedbinge.com, how many times can I say it? I do make a featured episode out of the ones that I have good guests on. So yours will be on there, as well as if you want to hear any of those other guests mentioned, they are one of the features on the homepage of the website, so they're really easy to navigate to.
That's super cool. I honestly should think about doing that on our website. Well,
I don't pin a whole lot of my solo episodes because I like to use that to try to like highlight the guests.
I think that's a cool idea. I've literally just done like a list in order of like every episode, and it has like a summary, and then it links to the Spotify one, just because that's where I always listen to my podcast. So I send people to listen to podcasts there, but I know some people are like diehard like Apple people or something like that, so they might get mad that it's not linking to Apple. But I might play with the idea of featuring some episodes.
Yeah, I love it. It's a cool little feature, and it's truthfully not hard for me to do. So I love taking advantage of that feature. And like I said, the voicemail thing's cool. I would be happy to tell you my podcast website host if you are interested, depending on how difficult you're finding your stuff. But they do not pay me, so I'm not going to say it here now.
Yeah, we could talk about it off the air. Perfect.
Today's episode is sponsored by The Blue Bottle. Tired of faffing about with gaudy salespeople and never finding what you want? Need a broom that can get you and the whole family around without the hassle? Then Blue Bottle Brooms is the company for you. Their pristine and versatile products always have us chuffed to bits. The Blue Bottle. A broom for all the family. Safe, reliable, and with built-in anti-burglar buzzer.
Thanks for tuning in, Muggles. If you're jonesing for more witchy goodness between episodes, you can check us out on Instagram at Dusty Cauldron Podcast, on Facebook at the Dusty Cauldron Podcast group, email us at dustycauldronpodcast@gmail.com, or check out our website at dustycauldronpodcast.com. You can subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening right now if you want to hear more. And remember, it's really fun to explore what might have happened if Lily forgave Snape and how that might impact the story, but we all know that that was never going to happen. And don't forget to stir whatever you've got brewing in your cauldron right now.
Bye!